He was a billionaire. She was his daughter, leading a protest against him. Her sign said, "You taught me better than this." And in that moment, his entire world changed. Welcome to Hearts and Billions. To get a shout out from us, kindly give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you are watching from in the comment section. The room was made of glass and silence. Victor Hale, polished suit, sharp jawline, eyes colder than the marble floor, sat at the head of a long boardroom table. Around him, executives nodded, flipping through thick folders filled with projections, permits, and signatures. At 62, Victor had built an empire from concrete and steel. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was the billionaire. Real estate, tech, politics, he had his hand in everything, and no one dared question his decisions. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice smooth, "approving this project will increase our quarterly gains by 14%. And the lot is already secured." There were murmurs of agreement. One man raised a hand. "The neighborhood isn't happy." Victor leaned forward slightly. "It's just land." Laughter followed. He signed the final page. Deal done. Outside the glass, the city buzzed like always. But just beyond the front gates, something had started. People were gathering, holding signs, chanting. Victor didn't notice yet. He stood, straightened his cuffs, and walked to the window out of habit. Just another day, until something caught his eye. A handmade sign, big black letters. "You taught me better than this." And holding it was her, his daughter. Victor froze. For a man who made billion-dollar decisions in seconds, who bought out companies before breakfast, and who fired executives with the flick of a pen, this moment unraveled him through the tall, spotless window of Hale Industries. He saw the one person he hadn't prepared for, his daughter, Sienna Hale, not in a dress, not at a fundraiser, not at his side, but outside in jeans and a worn jacket, hair tied back, holding a protest sign high over her head. "You taught me better than this." The words struck harder than any press headline ever had. Memories flood back. Victor stepped closer to the window, squinting. She looked older, stronger, but he'd know that face anywhere. The same fire in her eyes, the same stubborn tilt of her chin she had at 10 years old, when she told him she wanted to become an architect who builds homes people can actually afford. He told her the real world didn't work that way. She stopped talking to him for a week. That was Sienna. The past, they never fixed. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. Not since she walked out of his penthouse yelling, "You've forgotten what it means to be human," after a heated argument over his company, demolishing a shelter to build luxury condos. She never came back. Victor pretended not to care. But he never deleted her number. He read every article she published online. She had become a voice for the unheard, a rising activist, the kind who didn't just tweet, but showed up. And now, she was showing up at his building. The streets erupt. The crowd below swelled. Reporters, activists, even a few angry mothers carrying their children. Signs waved in the air. "People over profits. We live here too. Don't evict families to please investors." And right in the center, Sienna. Victor's phone buzzed. His assistant peeked in nervously. "Sir, should I call security?" He didn't answer. He kept staring. This wasn't just a protest. It was personal. Face to face, Victor adjusted his tie, walked out of the boardroom, and pressed the elevator button. "Where are you going, sir?" his assistant asked. Victor didn't turn. He stepped into the elevator and whispered to himself, "She's not here to talk, but I am." The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Victor Hale stood still, hands clenched behind his back, his reflection bouncing off the gold-trimmed walls. He tried to steady his breathing, but it was no use. He was about to face something money couldn't control, a daughter he hadn't spoken to in 3 years. 3 years ago, it had started as a dinner, just the two of them. She wore that same sharp look in her eyes, one he used to admire when she debated him at the dinner table. But that night the spark wasn't playful, it was fire. She had discovered that one of his companies evicted dozens of families from a building her non-profit had quietly helped save. She didn't come to ask, she came to fight. "You knew what that building meant," she said. "It's business," he replied. No, it's your name. And when he didn't apologize, she stood up, took her coat, and walked out. He never called. She never came back. Now, in the street, the elevator doors slid open. Victor stepped outside into the noise. Horns, chants, reporters shouting questions. Cameras turned the moment they saw him. Phones lifted. People pointed. But he wasn't looking at them. He was looking at her. Sienna turned slowly. Her sign lowered. They stared at each other like two people separated by more than time, by ideals, by hurt, by the weight of unspoken words. Her voice was calm but firm. Still building things that break people? Victor's voice cracked slightly. Still breaking things to build better? The crowd quieted, sensing something deeper was unfolding. I'm not here to embarrass you, she said. But I'm not going away either. Victor stepped closer. Why didn't you tell me you were behind this? She didn't flinch. Because I knew you'd try to fix it with a check. And that cut deep. A father's regret. He looked at her. Really looked. Tired eyes. Wind-blown hair. Shoulders that had carried a fight for too long. She was no longer the girl he tucked in at night. She was a woman now. With values. With scars. With a voice stronger than his silence. I thought I lost you, he finally whispered. She paused. You did, she said gently. But maybe not forever. For the first time in years, neither of them had anything left to prove. Only everything to repair. The air between them felt heavier than the chants around them. Sienna stood still, the protest sign still in her hand, but lowered now, like a shield no longer needed. Victor faced her, his suit crisp, his presence commanding. But his eyes looked tired, and maybe, for the first time, honest. They stood in silence. Father and daughter, builder and breaker, both standing on ground that once felt like home, and now like a battlefield. The world watched. Cameras zoomed in, phones live-streamed. People whispered, wondering if they were witnessing a confrontation or a reunion, or both. But Victor didn't care about the crowd. He wasn't speaking to the world. He was speaking to her. Sienna, he said softly. She held his gaze. Dad, so many things hung in the air. I'm sorry. You hurt me. I missed you. Why didn't you call? Why did you change? But none of them was spoken. Just silence. Pain without words. She didn't cry. Neither did he, but their eyes carried years of unspoken words. The kind you don't say in boardrooms or emails. The kind that sits in the chest like a stone. You raised me to lead, Sienna finally said. I did, he nodded. And now I'm leading. I see that. She stepped closer, gently placing her protest sign at her feet. I'm not your enemy, Dad, but I won't stand by while you destroy people who don't have your power. Victor looked down, and for once he had no defense. An unfinished bridge. A protester nearby started a new chant, breaking the moment. Reporters yelled questions again, but before Sienna walked back into the crowd, she leaned in and said, You're not beyond saving, but you're running out of chances. Victor stood there long after she disappeared into the crowd, still hearing her voice. Not just as his daughter, but as his conscience. The next day, Victor didn't return to his boardroom. Instead, he drove himself, no security, no press, to the neighborhood his latest project was set to demolish. It wasn't far, just 15 minutes from his skyscraper. But it felt like another world. Cracked sidewalks, rusted gates, chalk drawings on the walls. Children played in narrow alleys. Elders sat under makeshift umbrellas. It wasn't luxury, but it was home. And in the middle of it all, Sienna, clipboard in hand, crouched beside an elderly woman in a folding chair. Victor stepped out of the car. She looked up, and for the first time in years, she smiled. She walks him through it. Sienna didn't start with blame. She started with stories. That's Miss Anita, she said, pointing to the woman in the chair. Her late husband built this home with his bare hands after the war. She raised 4 kids here. You knock this down, she'll lose more than a roof. Victor nodded, following her as she walked. That's Jordan, she said, motioning to a teenager fixing a broken bike. He's tutoring kids in that room after school because the nearest learning center closed. If you build here, Those kids have nowhere to go. Victor stayed quiet. He was seeing now, really seeing, and it hurt. She faces him. They stopped in front of a brick wall covered in graffiti art, portraits of mothers, fathers, kids, some smiling, some not. Sienna turned to him. "You see charts and permits," she said softly. "I see lives." Victor looked down at his hands. He'd built hundreds of towers, closed thousands of deals. But here, with his daughter in this street of stories, he felt small. "Why didn't you bring me here before?" he asked. She sighed. "I tried. But I think you had to come when you were ready." His voice breaks. "I taught you how to fight," he said. "But I forgot why we should." Sienna smiled through glassy eyes. "You remembered now. That's enough for today." They sat down on a porch step as the sun set. No press, no reporters, just a father listening, and a daughter finally heard. That night, Victor Hale sat alone in his penthouse. No lights on, just the soft hum of the city below, and the sound of rain tapping against the windows. The same glass walls that once made him feel powerful, now made him feel trapped. He couldn't escape her voice. "You taught me better than this." Those words had been stuck in his head like a broken song. He had said them to her once when she was 12, defending a bullied classmate. Now she was throwing them back, not in anger, but in truth, and he couldn't deny it. He looked at the past. Victor opened a drawer in his study, one he hadn't touched in years. Inside were framed pictures of Sienna, dressed as a superhero on Halloween, hugging a puppy with missing teeth, holding a wooden model of a tiny home she designed for a school project. He remembered her saying, "One day I'm going to build homes where nobody gets kicked out." He had chuckled then. Now he was the man kicking people out. His throat tightened. The man he became. For decades, he built his empire by being unshakable. Profits over feelings, strategy over sentiment. That Victor Hale didn't ask questions, he gave orders. He didn't apologize, he signed checks. But tonight, that man was at war with someone else. The father who used to carry a sleeping Sienna from the car. The man who once told bedtime stories about heroes who protected people. Not crushed them, he whispered to himself. What if she's right? What if I lost myself chasing things I don't even need anymore? The question that changed him. Victor stood at the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. He wasn't thinking about his net worth, or his board, or the next deal. He was thinking about one question. If I died tomorrow, would she remember me as a father or a businessman? The answer broke him. And in that quiet room full of power, he made a decision that would shake his world. The next morning, Victor walked into the boardroom. This time, not as the silent power in the corner, but as a man ready to speak. The room fell quiet as he entered. Executives looked up from their tablets. His lead advisor, Martin, stood. "Sir, we were just reviewing the final phase of the East Haven project." Victor didn't sit. Instead, he said calmly, "Pause it." The room tensed. "Excuse me?" Martin blinked. "I said pause the project immediately." The backlash begins. Whispers broke out around the table. "You can't be serious. We've already secured the permits. We'll lose investors. Millions in returns." Victor raised a hand. "Let them go. We'll find new ones." Another board member, a sleek man in a blue suit, stood up. "Victor, with all due respect, this is emotional. This is personal. You're letting some protest—" "That protest," Victor interrupted, voice sharp, "is led by my daughter. And it's not emotional. It's ethical." The room froze. The pressure builds. Martin stepped forward. "If we halt this, it sends a message. That we're weak, that you're bending to public noise." Victor turned to him, steady. "I'm not bending to noise. I'm listening to truth." Martin leaned in, lower voice. "If you do this, there will be consequences. Stock drops, public confidence. The board could move to remove you, legally." Victor looked at him for a long moment. "Then remove me," he said. "But not before I try to fix what we've broken." Outside the room, as Victor left the meeting, his heart pounded, but not from fear, from clarity. For the first time in years, he was willing to risk everything. Not for profit, not for reputation, but for the daughter who once believed he was a man worth admiring. And maybe could believe it again. The press conference room at Hale Industries was packed. Cameras rolled. Journalists whispered. Investors waited in tense rows, hoping the billionaire would shut down the noise and get the project back on track. But something felt different today. Victor Hale didn't walk in with a speechwriter or PR team. He walked in alone. No flash, no charm. Just a man who looked like he hadn't slept in days, because he hadn't. He steps to the mic. Victor took a deep breath and faced the world. I've made a lot of decisions in my life. Most of them made money. Not all of them made sense. He paused. Today I was supposed to confirm the East Haven development, but instead I'm here to say, it's off. Gasps. Chairs creaked. Reporters leaned forward. I've listened to people. I've seen what this project would destroy. Not just homes, but histories, communities, trust. He looked into the camera now, not at investors, but at her. My daughter reminded me of who I was before I stopped asking questions. She made me look in the mirror. The world reacts. Phones buzzed. Live streams exploded. Victor Hale halts billion-dollar project after protest, led by his daughter. From power to principles, a father's public U-turn. Some praised him. Some called it weakness. But Victor didn't care, because that night, when he walked into a quiet community hall where Sienna was organizing the next protest, she looked up from her notes. Their eyes met. He didn't say a word. He just held up the signed statement. Project cancelled. Sienna's eyes welled up. She walked over slowly and hugged him for the first time in years. No applause, no cameras. Just a father finally choosing his child over the empire. The ribbon was red, stretched across the entrance of the new Sienna Hale community housing project. No marble walls, no gold plaques. Just freshly painted buildings, wide sidewalks, trees, and laughter in the air. Children ran between adults holding balloons. Elderly tenants stood with tears in their eyes, holding keys to their homes they no longer feared losing. Victor stood at the edge of the crowd, hands in his pockets, watching it all unfold. He didn't speak. He didn't pose for the cameras. He just watched. The moment. Sienna stepped onto the small stage with a mic in hand. Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on him. I used to think my father had forgotten who he was, she began, her voice steady. That the man who once told me to fight for the ones who can't speak had vanished behind glass offices and profits. She paused. But he didn't vanish. He just needed a reminder. The crowd turned as she stepped off the stage and walked toward him. Victor looked up. You remembered who you are, she said softly, handing him a small pair of child's scissors. He raised an eyebrow. Really? Sienna smiled. They're safer. You've caused enough damage. Victor laughed, and together they cut the ribbon. Later that day, they sat on a bench outside one of the new homes. It was quiet now. Sunset painted the sky soft orange. Victor stared ahead. You know, I built cities. I changed skylines. But none of that ever felt like today. Sienna leaned back, because none of that ever made people feel safe. He looked at her. Thank you for fighting me. She smirked. You were worth the fight. Then she rested her head lightly on his shoulder. The final thought. Victor Hale wasn't the man the world once feared. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't polished. But he was present. And in the end, he wasn't remembered for the towers he built. He was remembered for the daughter he finally listened to, and the home they built together, with love brick by brick.